The preview cycle for Armored Core 6 was kind of wild to watch, both as someone who previewed the title and as someone who went through the rest of the games fairly recently. Not because I think anyone expressing their opinions on what they expected the game to be were wrong or anything like that, but purely down to how that context of series familiarity could so colour people's perceptions of what we were all seeing. Where some people saw the planetary surface of Rubicon as barren and hollow compared to developer FromSoft's more fantastical worlds, I was coming at it from the angle of For Answer, a game whose true environmental desolation had real narrative purpose to it, but where the addition of these massive metal structures tinted in amber, till the mere addition of trees suggested a world whose beauty hadn't been so thoroughly ripped from the soil just yet, striking a bittersweet note as you thought about what you were going to have to do on this mission, when you considered what was actually causing those albeit gorgeous sunsets, a tableau as visually stunning, to me anyway, as it was narratively resonant. A mission whose briefing brought up a new enemy mech as a terrifying development in the enemy's combat capabilities was seen by some as a disappointment when the sortie itself could be finished in about a minute or so, like many objectives in the game. For me, not only was this bite-sized mission-based approach typical of the series, but similarly, the fact that the pilot you're up against is revealed to be nothing more than a terrified, ill-prepared rookie had me thinking just how deeply this fell in line with the series' incredible approach to world building, cementing your character as this brutal invading force within the kind of corporate dystopian hell Armored Core has always so effectively portrayed. Now, those dissenting opinions on the game's quality weren't ones I felt any need to react aggressively to at all, because honestly, I think they're valuable as a metric of how certain newcomers might react if they are to jump blindly into the fires of Rubicon. I know I talked in my preview about how the one true vision of what an Armored Core game definitively is doesn't really exist, but after beating Armored Core 6, even with its alterations to the formula, even with its slightly heightened approachability initially, make no mistake, this is about as Armored Core as it's possible to get. It's the same series fans have come to know and love, and whose quirks have made it more than a little difficult for many newbies to get into the games over the years. I will be curious to see then if Armored Core 6 really can propel the long dormant franchise into the kind of mainstream appeal I think it deserves, because clearly those nuances that series fans might luxuriate in with a knowing joy, some people, perhaps understandably, can find themselves missing entirely. Once again though, as with my preview, all I can provide to you is my experience, not as some hardened veteran of the games, just someone for whom the series quickly became an all-time favourite. If the older Armored Core games had me examining the reveal trailer for 6 with unbearable excitement, knowing that this cinematic was actually representative of the general flow of AC encounters, and then the preview event saw that excitement grow to fever pitch, playing the full game to completion has seen that joy reach levels I didn't think possible. I adore Armored Core 6 in a way I adore few other games. As I write this, having long since rolled credits and fallen deep into New Game Plus, I see the game taunting me from my Steam library, and all I want to do is drop this and play some more. Look, I can't say whether this game will be worth the decade-long wait some fans have endured, because I didn't endure it. I can't say whether or not this will be your new favourite Armored Core game, because as established, that's different for almost everyone. Right now though, this feels like absolutely everything I wanted out of a new AC game back when I made that initial video, and then some. Its combat is the perfect mix for me between the blistering speed of For Answer and the smoother heft of 3. Hell, it's that unrealised tactical potential of 5 given life. Its customization options, its environmental and level design, its story and world building are all expanded upon relative to prior entries. It is a comparatively massive game with so many incentives to keep going back for more. Further, aspects like the more rigidly staged boss battles, and the narrative consistency of being able to change loadouts upon destruction via checkpoints, those few things I perhaps had my doubts about following the preview, all of that stuff faded away when it dawned on me just how brutal, how incredible so many of these fights are, as well as how flexible you can be in your approach. But I think most of all, the thing that stands out to me most is that this is not some sanitized version of what came before in pursuit of broad commercial appeal. There are modernizations, sure, but this is an iteration in the way that any Armored Core game is an iteration. It still requires an investment from you, a belief that if you put in that effort up front to get into this world, to really learn the ins and outs of your mech, you will be rewarded handsomely. Of course, the rewards in question can be found in almost any Armored Core, that realization of just how deep your capabilities really go. But in 6, what I found particularly surprising was just how much weight the overarching narrative was pulling, and how absolutely I was along for the ride. I say surprising because, well, if you watch my larger video on the series, you'll know that I'm not super invested in the plots of these games nearly as much as I am the grim atmosphere they cultivate. And to be clear, Fires of Rubicon doesn't represent some totally massive shift from the ways in which Armored Core games typically tell their stories. The mission briefings still serve as your primary exposure to the plot driving this conflict along, with little time being spent delving into the lore or context of this world as distinct from other AC games. The bones are incredibly similar. Corporations waging war over planetary resources hired you to do their dirty work so that either party can gain just slightly more power over one more planet, reeling from some world-altering cataclysm. But the speed at which all these faction names are thrown at you might leave even some seasoned players reeling, in a way that belies the actual simplicity of the power structure here. I mean, right, normally I wouldn't do this, but I think the story might resonate more if I just lay this out for you without any spoilers, obviously. Dafeng is a subsidiary of Balam, with the Red Guns serving as that corporation's hired guns. These mercenaries use the codename format of Gun 1 through 13. Schneider, on the other hand, is the affiliate of Arquebus, who hires the Vespers as their mercenaries instead. If you hear, say, V4 Rusty, that codename signifies a Vesper working for Arquebus. Both Balam and Arquebus are battling it out for the last of planet Rubicon's coral, a mysterious and dwindling resource with high value and apocalyptic potential. The Rubicon Liberation Front is opposing both of them, with the planet's survivors, following a coral fire which totally contaminated the surface, still viewing this resource with a near religious reverence. In short, it's Balam, Dafeng, Red Guns versus Arquebus, Schneider and Vespers, with the RLF as the agent of chaos in the middle, I suppose. Hopefully that made life a bit easier for you going into all of this. And from having to spell out these faction alignments so plainly, you might think of this as yet another vague, abstruse FromSoft story, and for sure, it's not necessarily a revolution in the developer's approach. Things will happen mid-mission with next to no context, and if you aren't following every detail in the briefings, you will likely find yourself in a mission wondering who you're even there for. Now, to a certain extent, this is part of the point of AC narratives to me, to render lines between friend and foe meaningless, to portray these worlds as so hostile, so brutal, as to be almost beyond saving, with your only course of action then being to just survive as long as possible under these oppressive conditions, to stave off debt long enough that you don't become literal property. And with your character's presence on Rubicon, under the stewardship of one handler Walter, being justified by a need to undo the effects of human augmentation gone awry, to buy your life back from the corporations, there is definitely still that element of personal necessity outweighing the ethical mess of the missions you're forced to carry out, often at cross purposes for these opposing companies. All this to say, it all feels very Armored Core on the surface. That said, while you rarely, if ever, actually see the main players involved here, unless they're a mech pilot like yourself, I found myself pretty engrossed in the ongoing ongoing drama here. There's a real focus placed on your ongoing relationships with individual characters this time around, with the game's increased length relative to other entries, allowing for greater development of each personality, their complicated and evolving personal relationship to the situation on Rubicon, how this might influence your interactions with them. Look, I don't know that I've ever formed a legitimate bond with characters in an AC game before, but man, that was absolutely the case here. I feel like most AC games reveal the potential depth of their characters in retrospect, through scant descriptions and log entries and the like, in amongst the cracks of the larger corporate conflict taking centre stage. Here, that depth is plainly apparent in your moment-to-moment interactions, where that more relatable, individual focus saw me genuinely puzzling over who I could really trust in a fun political espionage thriller kind of way, but coupled with moments both expectedly tragic and, at times, surprisingly heartwarming. It's so rare for one of these games to really let you revel in the occasional triumph like Fires of Rubicon does, which, like so much of the game's still incredible world building, through both environmental design and gameplay, is rendered all the more bittersweet, as the game asks you to make few but incredibly tough choices when they do arise. The landscapes here might be icy, inhospitable, but I can't deny that I look at these environments after spending countless hours trudging through pitch black cities, endless grey and beige hellscapes, and see a good deal of beauty here, relatively speaking. The metal structures you stumble upon seem almost impossible in their vastness, their complexity. The cave systems you explore intimidating in their endless depth, both making for some surprisingly open-ended approaches to a lot of these missions as you clamber your way up and through these labyrinthine behemoths. But at so many points during my playthrough, I found myself just stopping and staring. My jaw thoroughly dropped as I'd stand atop an errant shard of this industrial monolith, bathed in sunset in just such a way that it made me feel legitimately small, provided the kind of humbling vista I've never seen in an AC game before. When you hear from characters from the Liberation Front, you get the feeling that there's still some hope in this world, however minuscule, something indescribably lacking in the wastelands of those prior games, but something that feels readily, achingly apparent in Fires of Rubicon. You might get the feeling that some of this world can still be saved, until you think about what's actually causing a lot of those fiery tarpaulins to coat the sky, the truth behind that beauty, and things quickly become complicated. It's a complication that manifests in those missions where you will have to make a choice about your allegiances going forward. Not exactly constant, and perhaps not super obvious up front as to the effect that your actions will have on the larger conflict, but at multiple points the game had me pause for upwards of 5 minutes, truly agonising over which route I would ultimately go down. See, the game isn't merely asking questions of good versus evil. Characters are asking, you're asking yourself, if a world so thoroughly decimated is even worth preserving, or if it's best to just put it out of its misery, especially when no one seems to know just how devastating the consequences of miscalculation regarding the planet's fate could be. But then why do you get to make that choice when you're the invading force, when you are at least partially responsible for its continued ruin? For my money, the AC game this setup reminds me of the most is obviously For Answer, except it feels far more like there's something left to lose in the Rubicon Liberation Front's fight. As is tradition in terms of the series' world building through mechanics and systems, the Front's missions might see you taking on harder challenges for less money, but such is the price of hope, right? The added restriction of a single save slot might seem irritating to those that, like me, are used to being able to load straight back into that point of narrative divergence and pick the other option, but hey, honestly, it might be the key to making your choices feel like they truly matter in this world. You really have to commit to your decision here. It's all remarkably compelling stuff, but one factor that might contribute to the relative depth of this story is the sheer grandeur of it all. The mission structure might be the same as before, with bespoke sorties chosen from the hangar ranging from about 2 to 10 minutes in length, but the scale of those conflicts has absolutely exploded in a lot of cases. Even in the quieter missions, these maps can feel indescribably massive. Some bosses make you wonder how you would even begin to approach them, let alone dismantle them. You'll find yourself at points having to navigate battlefields with full-scale warfare going on between different factions, stealth missions, daring escapes from massive explosions within deep caves, at least a couple of borderline exploration missions, just allowing you to soak in how huge this world actually is. Not only does all of this add a great deal of variety to what might seem like a fairly rigid mission structure, but when I said that preview build felt truly epic, I hadn't seen anything yet. Moreover, you can see how grand AC6 is by just how much time it will take you to beat the thing. As I mentioned in the preview, I was surprised to see just how chunky that opening chapter was, and while the rest of the 5 total chapters might vary in terms of how many missions they require you to complete, that claim made by the developers that this opening comprised about 20% of the game's total length wasn't inaccurate. At around 20 hours for a first playthrough, it's by far the longest AC game I've played. And let me emphasise now that without spoiling anything, there is so much more to see once those credits roll. With everything this game has to offer, it's not unreasonable to expect that people will spend many dozens of hours with this game, a lot of which will be, sure, replaying missions you've previously done, whether in the New Game Plus mode or just aiming for those coveted S ranks, a prospect that might seem rather dull upon first glance, but when a game feels as stupendous to play as AC6 does, any excuse to jump back in feels more than warranted. I straight up can't remember the last time I had this much fun with an action game. Probably For Answer, honestly. And I know I've been drawing comparisons with that game a lot, but looking at this footage, you get what I mean. Fires of Rubicon is fast. I don't know if I'd say it's necessarily the fastest in the series, but that's possibly because such a relentless pace is balanced out by just how weighty everything feels. 4th Gen Armored Core could, at times, feel like I was just frantically throwing a little toy all about the place. Fires of Rubicon, from its animation to its sound design, really brings out a bone-crunching ferocity with every bazooka blast, every burst from a rifle, every glorious wind-up from a crushing laser blade. Every time you use the assault boost feature, it's as if you can imagine the pilot's face being stretched back by sheer kinetic force, weaving through the barrage of enemy missiles, honing in on your chosen unfortunate hostile, whacking great massive chunks out of their stagger bar before going in for the killer blow is a process that frankly never loses its luster. The kind of satisfying mechanical rhythm that will see you actively seeking out whatever enemies you can find, no matter how daunting, just so that you can explore your deep well of combat capabilities some more. With each part whose stats you've spent ages fawning over in the store, in concert with the other unique items you've bought, the legs you've opted for example, providing your own unique suite of mechanics to utilize, to internalize. That said, while the game is definitely more approachable initially, providing a few training missions that do explain the vague outlines of how each type of part might function were you to buy one yourself, this is not a game where everything is just laid out for you. The difficulty curve is not a steady one. It still expects you to put in the work to get to grips with this stuff yourself. And even lowly hostiles can quickly do ruinous damage to your armor if you're not careful. Some missions will be over in a flash, while others will require comparatively grueling feats of endurance. I guess though, that's part of what I've always liked about Armored Core, that you can never be fully sure of whatever's coming next, so you need to be on your toes at all times. Plus, I've said it once and I will say it again, the quality of life features introduced bring with them as many tactical considerations as outright benefits. Some potentially awkward camera issues aside, the newly added target assist assist doesn't remove the challenge from scenarios. In fact, if you lose that lock, depending on the enemy you're up against, it can almost be more panic-inducing to have to find it again, as you might as well have just placed a huge target on your own back. Healing kits, as it turns out, can see their effectiveness increased through OS upgrades gained through the typical 1v1 arena fights against other mechs. A joyous addition in themselves, with some quirks this time around that series fans might appreciate, but even at that higher level, these kits aren't going to be a crutch you can lean on in the face of equally increased hostility. There are some moves made by this game that see some of the more atmospheric hostility lessened just somewhat. You know, despite the overwhelming grip the corporations have over this world and its denizens, the economic harshness of prior titles isn't quite so all-encompassing. Debt, once a direct, systemic marker of your place in the world, and the thing encouraging you to dehumanize those you came across for the sake of personal progress, is here just baked into your character's backstory. While this does, on its face, feel like a loss of sorts, given how comprehensive the world building in those older games felt, it's not the first game where debt hasn't been much of a factor. Once again, I give you 4 Answer as proof of that. Similarly though, AC6's economy and mission structure is such that if you do happen to find yourself short on credits and overwhelmed by the sheer option paralysis of the customization menu, you can be safe in the knowledge that you're only ever a few minutes away from affording that one part you're after, following a return to an older mission that you can now approach with increased efficiency thanks to your knowledge of the level layout and enemy placement. These bite-sized missions are fun enough, these environments open enough, that if you're like me, you'll grow to relish any opportunity to fly through these levels again just to show off your quickly developing piloting skills a little bit. That said, as is usually the case with these games, at about the midpoint, I'd found myself sticking with a build that largely just worked for me. My choice usually boiling down to a bazooka with as many missiles as I could pack on my back, my trusty energy blade, and tetrapod legs offering the greatest balance in my mind between mobility and weight capacity, meaning I actually felt fairly flush with credits about halfway through the game. I'm on easy street with this stuff. And this is the kind of hubris the game seeks to severely punish with its boss battles. That difficulty curve may be uneven in itself, but I get the feeling that its spikes in the form of these encounters will push many new players to their absolute limits very early on. Further, those preview bosses that saw many genuinely stuck as early as Mission 7, those are nothing compared to what comes later. This was some serious, will I be able to get past this before the embargo type stuff. But God, what glorious battles they so often end up being. Some are designed to show you the importance of vertical flight. Many exist to get you to push past that fear of bombardment by exemplifying the power of aggressive play. But almost all are so visually stunning, such monumental encounters, that any initial doubts I might have had about how staged they may have appeared just melted away, oftentimes replaced with an utterly debilitating frustration as I realized that the reason certain chapters have less missions than others comes down to how much time you will inevitably spend on these relentless machines. And let me tell you, when you get rocked by these bosses, as frequently as most people probably will, you're going to wish you had the foresight to buy or not sell absolutely everything you could, just so you have something else to experiment with when the option to access the garage from a checkpoint comes around. Because as I mentioned in the preview, you can access pre-purchased parts in the garage, but you can't access the shop to buy any more without exiting a mission fully and having to retread all that ground back to the boss just for one more chance with a different setup. On the flip side though, this is a game where mechanical exploits feel like they're not only excused, but actively encouraged, because any such exploits are the result of careful analysis of enemy movement patterns, of deep familiarity with your own mech, and realizing the potential that was always there that you might not have used before. Like, take that one enemy featured prominently in the gameplay footage released by Bandai Namco. Man, with its massive arms and furnace spewing near constant fire and lava, this enemy sure seems daunting, and it might have been, were it not for the fact that the tetrapod legs allow you to hover for a frankly absurd amount of time. Beyond mere exploits though, these bosses tore me away from the comparatively flailing mindset that had gotten me through similarly breakneck games like For Answer, and had me really drilling down through that frustration, through those shaking hands and raised heartbeat, and saw me flying, fighting with a purpose that rendered victory so sweet every single time. You emerge from these encounters scarred, but grizzled and hardened all the same, fully ready to unleash your newfound fury upon the minions that now lie before you. It was in these battles, for example, where I learned not only the necessity of the assault boost as a means of just keeping up with certain particularly nimble bosses, but the propulsive joy of that boost kick that proceeded to become one of my main strategies in every battle since. I demand everyone buy this upgrade. Use it as soon as is feasibly possible. You can thank me later. And further, here's some motivation if you're feeling particularly stuck. Once you get geared up and really learn your mech, returning to those bosses that previously might have taken me over an hour to beat, and now demolishing them before characters even had a chance to finish talking about how massive a threat they apparently posed, that's the kind of thrill you can only get from something like Armored Core. The beauty of AC in general, and especially here with the increased frequency of boss battles, is that the winning strategy can often lay behind a weapon or a part you might never have considered before, because it seemed so alien to your preferred playstyle. But the nuances brought to the table by that errant part you unlocked for purchase in the store and yet proceeded to completely overlook several hours prior could very well be enough to give you that edge you so desperately need, and suddenly the whole world opens up to you in terms of possibility. What's more though, that strategy you stumbled into isn't a surefire one-size-fits-all thing. What worked for you might do absolutely nothing for someone else, and they might find a similar revelatory moment in a completely different purchase. Consistent with the themes of the game, just because a part is newer, more recently unlocked, doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be better for your personal approach. For example, I tested out every melee weapon I got access to, and every single time I opted instead for the starting blade, purely because I knew it. I knew the feel of it, the way that second swing would allow me the opportunity to close the gap if the first missed. I grew to intuit its cooldown timer in relation to my other weapons, in a way that allowed me to naturally maintain a constant salvo wherever possible. Such is the natural flow of an AC game, and one that I feel is perhaps best represented in Fires of Rubicon's vast suite of mechanics, where that onslaught of on-screen visual information gradually stops feeling like disparate lines and bars and starts becoming an extension of the action on screen, your eyes constantly darting about to check on various things at once, all with split-second timing to govern your next move. With entering this flow state being such a crucial component of success in these often unforgiving battles, it's worth pointing out that keyboard and mouse controls, with this being the first game in the series to release on PC, feels at first to be the perfect fit. Aiming is surprisingly snappy, movement feels good, but with the sheer amount of stuff you can do in these games, let's just say that there's a reason that the Armored Core grip is a meme. And I should say I eagerly await videos of people trying to play this thing holding their keyboards with the keys facing away from them. For me, the game is just too mechanically busy to feel right on a keyboard. When the battles move this fast, you don't want to constantly be thinking, wait, which button is it to boost again? But hey, of course, your mileage may vary with that. Similarly, I wouldn't want to speak with any authority on how this PC port will run for you on your specific hardware, or how the network features and online PvP battles will fare, in the latter's case because we didn't have access to online features during the review window. All I know is that the game is fully playable offline, and it's wild how that's worthy of note in 2023, but here we are. In the former's case though, the port itself, From Software's PC releases have varied wildly in terms of quality, so I don't want to say anything definitive that will apply to every system, or that there won't be some major post-launch issue. Again, your mileage may vary with this, take what I say with a grain of salt. All I can say is that on my i9 and 3080, that same setup that still sees Elden Ring pause and stutter with alarming regularity, AC6 ran near flawlessly as far as I could tell. It even runs pretty well on the Steam Deck, albeit noticeably framier of course, and seeing my handheld reach temperatures hitherto unseen, as if it were powered by Coral itself. Back to customization though, it's talked about in AC games a lot, and for good reason. It really is the central pillar of this series, and the fact that so many different playstyles can be so gracefully accommodated has always been commendable on From Software's part. It's just that here, man, they go above and beyond with the options available to you, with more options unlocking as you go through New Game Plus. So many decisions as agonizing as the ones determining the fate of the entire planet, as I try in vain to wrangle together a build that will let me use the legs and the bazooka I really like without sacrificing armor points or falling foul of energy limits, choosing whether to spend my hard-earned arena points on an OS upgrade for my healing effectiveness or increased explosive damage. One more avenue of choice dictating just how much of a glass cannon or a tank you want your mech to be. So much time spent in that garage painting and styling my mech with the most garish colours imaginable, creating some tokusatsu megazord nightmare that will completely undercut the gravity of any encounter I'm getting myself into, bringing into stark focus the fact that Armored Core 6 is a game about building cool action figures and smashing them into each other with utter glee as much as it is a corporate dystopian hellscape. And that's just it. Besides the occasional frustration as I worried about how I would ever surmount a particular challenge, the little concerns about why, in a game that introduces such quality of life features, you still have to navigate between separate menus to buy and equip items, why you can't simply buy one weapon and switch it over to the other hand in assembly, as opposed to having to buy the same weapon again separately for just a different hand. Besides all of that, there was rarely a moment when playing Fires of Rubicon where I wasn't utterly dazzled by what I was seeing, bringing up in me the kind of childlike wonder that, holy moly, this is what games were meant to be. It's the same kind of wonder I imagine many veterans of the series experienced when overcoming the many quirks of this series to get into those super early games back in the day, realizing the beauty, the genius that lay underneath. I've talked a lot about Armored Core this year, and I know that may be tiring for those who aren't interested, but I'm serious when I say it very quickly entered into the realm of all-time favourites. This series has become remarkably special to me. I feel like I've been on something of a journey with it, as the title of that first video suggests, and that 6 is a culmination of sorts. I guess I'm just glad to say that if you've been on a similar kind of journey to my own, that this destination isn't only worth the lengthy road travelled to get there, but seems as if there's a lot more ground to be trodden. If Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon is anything to go by, then the future of Armored Core is very bright indeed, and I, for one, could not be happier about that fact. Thank you all so much for watching and joining me on this journey with a series that I now hold very dear. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, all that daft YouTube stuff. It really helps the channel and it means the world. A massive thanks as well to my patrons who you can see on screen and are all getting access to exclusive, fully produced videos that aren't available here. Your continued support is what allows me to keep going with the work I do on this channel in a sustainable way, and I seriously cannot express how grateful I am for that. impact. You are all the best. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Artyom Vitsyuk, Mel Meek, Michael Tritt, Rickety Cricket, Cameron Siniceros, Urban Cheese, Charles J. Liu, Alistair Dunn, Vitautis Catharsis, Dolly Bowman, Young Condor, David Karstens, Tom Webster, Danis Sikauskis, Jordan Midler, Christopher Faherty, Nicholas Villeneuve, Ruth Natman, Yogesh Deshpande, Leah Chinello, Captain Knussbrich, Bryce Snyder, CPJ MLT Limited, David Björk, Timothy Jones, Matthew Grover, Tommy Carver Chaplin, Shardfire, Lynn Browning, Dallas Keane, Charlie Kimball, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you all so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you all next time.